Okay, it's day 242 off the grid, and again I'm doing a vlog. Well, today I'm going to do something that does not have a lot to do with solar, but it has a hell of a lot to do with being off the grid. And what this is, anyone who's familiar with coal ranges, this is a flue brush. And it can be used to sweep out the flue, obviously. And also the bits down behind the back of the range between the oven and the sort of the chamber that leads up to the flue. Now it's important to keep these cleaned out, because otherwise soot dendrites build up in there, and as well as starting to present a sort of a chimney fire risk, they make the oven heat rather slowly. So keeping a coal range clean is very important for its efficiency. Anyway, this is the new brush that I've made. Here was the end of the old brush. As you can see, it is pretty stuffed. This is probably about as old as the coal range, and well, it's taken quite a beating. Probably more so in the years when I've been using it, because I do use it quite vigorously. It was probably just getting to that age where it was starting to become brittle. So I purchased this new brush. It's actually a cheap brush I got from Uncle Bill's, designed for automotive car cleaning, so it's actually a lot softer than the original brush. It's probably got plastic bristles rather than whatever horsehair or whatever those are, but I think it will, owing to its greater density of bristles, I think it will do a fine job in removing the dendrites. So there we go. It came with this handle attached. Now that handle just had a hole, like a tapered hole, and the twisted wire was just screwed into there. Now I was hoping that I'd have more of a length of twisted wire, maybe nearly about the length of this handle, maybe to about there, sticking out the bottom, and I could have just used some tie wire and stuff. But I found that when I took the handle off, I only had a length about, about barely 2 centimeters. So I needed some sort of clamp that could put a lot of force on a very small area. So this is what I came up with, using some hose clips, some fairly good ones that can take a bit of pressure without starting to strip out like a lot of the really uber cheap ones do. Although these were just from the $2 shop, so you never know. And a bit of trusty cable insulation. This yellow stuff's off a 1mm squared 3-core cable, and that fitted on the wire of the brush end quite well. And this heavier stuff is off a 1.5mm squared cable, and that of course fitted onto the heavier wire of the original flue brush handle. You need a long wire handle like this so you can bend it to get it around into places. It's really like a massive bottle brush, really, is what it is, isn't it? But you just can't go and buy a flue brush anymore. So the idea of using the insulation on there rather than just putting these on directly was to give it a wider surface to grip over, which has made this really robust. So I don't expect it to come off, and that's really important, because if this came off somewhere in the innards of the coal range, that would be a real pest. So we've got to make sure it doesn't come off, hence why two hose clips, not just one, even though one seems to be strong enough. Second one's a backup. So there we go. That's day 242. So that's what I was up to on this day. Of course I'm up to other things, but this is something I thought you might want to check out. I've been running those tests on those amorphous panels, and I'm doing it in a very empirical kind of way, but so far I found that I measured it in the morning when it was really overcast. I mean, much more overcast than it is now. It's still pretty overcast. And the two amorphous panels were producing about 9% of the total production of that circuit. So what we've got here is a small amount of amorphous panels and a large amount of crystalline panels. So naturally they are going to produce less energy than the crystalline ones, because there's less of them in terms of wattage. But the idea being is, as the sun gets brighter, the amorphous panels should in theory produce less of a percentage of the power, as the crystalline panels take advantage of that brighter sun and start coming up more towards their full production. And I measured it before under this sky that I just showed, and yeah, the amorphous production has dropped down to about 7.5% of the total production. So that would suggest that the theory is perhaps true, that they do better under the dull light. I can't wait to measure it under a really, really sunny, you know, when the sun's almost directly on the panels, and see what the difference is then. But so far the theory is actually holding true, but as I said in my previous video, or on the addendum bit of it, you know, you can't really get amorphous panels, so it's almost a moot point. They're so hard to get, they're expensive now because no one really wants them, so it's probably cheaper just to overkill on the crystalline panels. Yeah. I mean, I would wager that 200 watts worth of monocrystalline panels is going to produce more power under all conditions than 100 watts of an amorphous panel, and it's only going to take up slightly more room having the two 100 watt panels of crystalline.